June 19, 1938. 45,000 people gather at Colombes, just outside Paris, for a World Cup final between Italy and Hungary. The defending champions arrive wearing blue. Hungary arrives with one of Europe's most dangerous attacks. Above them sits a continent running out of time. Austria has already been annexed by Nazi Germany. Spain is trapped in civil war. Czechoslovakia is under mounting pressure. 15 months later, Germany will invade Poland and Europe will be at war. This is not history waiting politely outside the stadium. It is already changing which countries can play, which flags exist, and which players are allowed to call themselves a team. Yet when the whistle blows, the football is alive. Italy attacks with the confidence of a champion. Hungary responds almost immediately. 6 goals will be scored. Silvio Piola will produce the defining performance of his international career. Giuseppe Meazza will captain the first nation ever to defend the World Cup. And then the tournament will disappear for 12 years. France 1938 is the World Cup that proved the competition could survive politics for 3 weeks, but not escape history forever. This is the story of a great Italian team, a Brazilian superstar, a missing Austrian side in the last World Cup before the world changed. When FIFA selected France in August 1936, the decision carried symbolism. Jules Rimet, the French FIFA president who had pushed the World Cup into existence, had led the organization for more than a decade. Bringing the tournament to his country honored the man most closely identified with the project. France also had rail connections, established stadiums, and a large press market. For FIFA, it looked practical and prestigious, but choosing Europe for a second consecutive tournament angered South America. Argentina had expected that hosting would rotate back across the Atlantic after Italy 1934. There was no binding continental rotation rule, but there was an expectation of balance. Argentina withdrew, as did Uruguay, still carrying resentment over the limited European participation in 1930. The World Cup called itself global, but travel costs, institutional mistrust, and FIFA's European center of gravity kept narrowing the field. France planned matches across 10 cities, from Paris and Colombes to Marseille, Bordeaux, Toulouse, Strasbourg, Reims, Lille, Le Havre, and Antibes. It was a national event built around trains, newspapers, radio, and stadium crowds. There was still no television audience connecting the world in real time. Most people experienced the tournament through voices, photographs, headlines, and imagination. That limitation gave newspapers enormous power. A single photograph or dramatic sentence could become the version of a match remembered for generations. Austria had qualified. The country possessed one of Europe's most admired football traditions and had reached the semifinal in 1934. But on March 11 through 13, 1938, Nazi Germany annexed Austria in the Anschluss. The political act erased Austria as an independent entrant less than 3 months before kickoff. Its place in the finals was not filled, leaving Sweden without a first-round opponent. Several Austrian players were incorporated into a combined German squad, but combination did not automatically create harmony. Tactical habits differed, personal loyalties differed. The image of a larger German team suggested strength. The football reality was more complicated. Matthias Sindelar, the great Austrian forward, did not appear at the tournament. Later retellings have turned every detail of his absence into a clean story of heroic resistance. But the historical record is less tidy. What is certain is that an exceptional generation of Austrian footballers lost the chance to represent its own country because a dictatorship had removed that country from the map. Spain was absent for another reason. Its civil war had begun in 1936 and made participation impossible. The Spanish team that had pushed Italy through 210 violent minutes in 1934 was gone from the competition. These were not minor withdrawals. Two of Europe's strongest football cultures were missing because political conflict had overtaken sport. Before the first ball moved in France, the tournament had already recorded the shape of the crisis around it. 37 teams entered the qualification process, but withdrawals and political upheaval reshaped it repeatedly. Italy, as defending champion, and France as host, qualified automatically. That was new. In 1934, even host Italy had been required to qualify. With Austria removed after the draw, only 15 teams appeared in France. Sweden advanced to the quarterfinal without playing a first-round match. The geographic balance was even more revealing. 12 of the 15 teams represented Europe. Brazil was the only South American entrant. Cuba represented the Caribbean, and the Dutch East Indies, now Indonesia, became the first team from Asia to appear at a men's World Cup. Their presence mattered even if both were outsiders. The tournament's map was expanding in one direction while contracting in another. The format remained ruthless. There were no groups. Lose once and the tournament could be over. If a match stayed level after extra time, the teams returned for a replay. There were no substitutions and no penalty shootouts. A goalkeeper could be injured, a forward exhausted, or a defender barely able to run. The match continued. This system produced urgency, but it also rewarded survival. France 1938 would need 4 extra time matches and 2 replays in its opening round alone. The World Cup had become bigger as an event, but the competition itself was still a test designed with very little mercy. Brazil came to France with a player who made the tournament feel modern. Leônidas da Silva was fast, inventive, acrobatic, and unpredictable. French coverage called him the Black Diamond and the Rubber Man. Those labels reflected admiration, but also the racialized language through which European media often framed black athletes. On the field, he did not need mythology. His movement and finishing were enough. Brazil's opening match against Poland in Strasbourg became one of the wildest games in World Cup history. The pitch was heavy with rain and mud. Brazil led, Poland recovered, and the score reached 4-4 after 90 minutes. In extra time, Brazil finally won 6-5. Leônidas scored 3 according to the official tournament record, while Poland's Ernest Wilimowski scored 4 and still went home. 11 goals, a hat trick, a 4-goal losing performance, and a shoe reportedly lost in the mud. The game felt less like a controlled international and more like football, escaping its boundaries. For Brazil, the victory announced possibility. The country had participated in every World Cup, but it had not yet reached the final rounds as a true contender. Leônidas changed the emotional temperature. He gave neutral spectators someone to wait for, newspaper editors someone to place above the fold, and young viewers a new image of what a global football star could be. Brazil would not win in 1938, but this tournament was part of the path toward the football identity that would later define the World Cup itself. Across France, the opening round refused to behave. Switzerland and Germany drew 1-1 after extra time in Paris. 5 days later, Switzerland won the replay 4-2, eliminating a German side swollen by annexation but weakened by its lack of cohesion. The result punctured propaganda about political expansion automatically producing sporting power. A bigger territory had not created a better team. Cuba produced the tournament's great outsider story. Against Romania in Toulouse, the Cubans came from behind repeatedly to draw 3-3 after extra time. In the replay, they won 2-1. It remains Cuba's only appearance at the Men's World Cup, and they reached the quarterfinal. The Dutch East Indies had a shorter experience, losing 6-0 to Hungary, but their appearance placed Asia on the tournament stage for the first time. A global competition is built not only by champions, it is built by countries that arrive once and permanently widen the map. Italy nearly joined the opening round casualties. Against Norway in Marseille, the champions scored in the second minute through Pietro Ferraris but conceded a late equalizer. Only an offside decision prevented Norway from taking the lead near the end of regulation. In extra time, Silvio Piola scored the winner. Italy escaped 2-1, and the tournament gained its first warning that defending a title away from home would be very different from winning one in Rome. Italy arrived carrying two identities. It was the reigning World Cup champion and the 1936 Olympic champion, coached by Vittorio Pozzo and led by Giuseppe Meazza. It was also the national team of Benito Mussolini's fascist state. The regime had exploited the 1934 tournament at home, and the players could not cross into France without that political meaning following them. Before the quarterfinal against France, Italy wore black shirts rather than its usual blue. Black was the identifying color of Italian fascism. When sections of the crowd responded with hostility, the Italian players gave the fascist salute, and according to Pozzo's later account, held it until the reactions subsided. The gesture was political theater performed inside a football stadium, whether individual players experienced it as belief, obedience, provocation, or self-protection. The danger in telling this history is to flatten every player into the regime around him. Italy was also an extraordinary football team. Meazza could create and finish. Piola gave the attack power and timing. Gino Colausi stretched defenses. Giovanni Ferrari linked midfield and attack. Pozzo had refreshed the squad while preserving its competitive intelligence. Recognizing their quality does not excuse the symbols they carried. It explains why the political machine wanted them so badly. Propaganda works best when attached to real achievement. France had beaten Belgium 3-1 in the opening round and entered the quarterfinal with a full stadium behind it. No host had yet failed to win the World Cup. Uruguay had triumphed in 1930, Italy in 1934. The French public could imagine the pattern continuing. Italy broke it. Colausi scored after 9 minutes. France answered almost immediately through Oscar Heiserer, and for a while the host matched the champion. Then Piola took control. He scored early in the second half and added another late in the match. Italy won 3-1. France became the first host eliminated before the final and the first host not to lift the trophy. The match also clarified Italy's transformation from 1934. 4 years earlier, the team had survived Spain and Austria through physically punishing, disputed contests. In France, it looked more controlled. Piola gave Pozzo a decisive center forward. While Meazza could influence the game without carrying every scoring burden, Italy was still pragmatic, still comfortable protecting a lead, but it could attack with precision. The champion was not simply repeating itself, it had evolved. For France, the tournament continued without its host. The crowds remained, but the emotional center moved. Brazil offered spectacle. Hungary offered goals. Italy offered the possibility of history. From this point, every match asked the same question. Could anyone stop the first successful World Cup title defense? Brazil's quarterfinal against Czechoslovakia in Bordeaux became known as the Battle of Bordeaux. The label is not poetic exaggeration. The match produced violent fouls, 3 dismissals, and serious injuries. Czechoslovak goalkeeper František Planička played on with what was later reported as a broken arm. Oldřich Nejedlý also suffered a major injury. There were no substitutions. The teams finished 1-1 after extra time and had to return for a replay. The replay 2 days later was almost a different match because injuries and suspensions forced extensive lineup changes. Czechoslovakia scored first, but Brazil recovered to win 2-1. Leônidas scored the equalizer, and Roberto added the winner. Brazil had survived Poland's 11-goal storm and then 2 matches of attrition against the 1934 finalist. Its reward was a semifinal against the defending champion with almost no recovery time. This is where later storytelling often becomes too simple. A popular version says Brazil arrogantly rested Leônidas because officials assumed the final was guaranteed. Contemporary evidence is less decisive. Leônidas had been carrying injuries after 2 punishing quarterfinals, and accounts differ over whether the choice was tactical, medical, or overconfident. What is certain is that he did not start against Italy. Brazil lost, and the absence of the tournament's leading scorer became irresistible material for regret. The responsible conclusion is not that one man's arrogance threw away a World Cup. It is that a thin squad, a brutal schedule, and a disputed selection decision met the most experienced team in the competition. The semifinal in Marseille brought together the tournament's most exciting attack and its most complete team. Even without Leônidas in the starting lineup, Brazil carried speed and confidence. Italy carried experience. The first half ended scoreless. Then Colombes put Italy ahead in the 51st minute. 9 minutes later, Italy received a penalty. Meazza stepped forward. The story that followed became one of the World Cup's most replayed pieces of folklore. The elastic in his shorts had broken, so he held them up with one hand while taking the kick. The basic incident is widely remembered, though its theatrical details have grown through repetition. What matters competitively is simple. Italy's captain converted under pressure and made it 2-0. Brazil scored late through Romeo, but Italy won 2-1. Brazil later defeated Sweden 4-2 in the third-place match, and Leônidas scored twice. He finished as the tournament's leading scorer with 7 goals under FIFA's official accounting. More important than the number was the impression. Brazil had reached the semifinal for the first time, played with attacking freedom, and produced the event's most magnetic individual star. Defeat delayed the country's coronation. It did not hide the direction of travel. While Italy and Brazil absorbed the attention, Hungary moved through the other half of the bracket with frightening efficiency. It beat the Dutch East Indies 6-0, Switzerland 2-0, and Sweden 5-1. 13 goals scored, 1 conceded. György Sarosi was the team's organizer and leader. Gyula Zengler supplied goals. Paul Titkos and Ferenc Sas gave the attack width and speed. Hungarian football belonged to the same Central European tradition that had produced Austria's Wonder Team and Czechoslovakia's 1934 finalists. It valued technique, movement, and combination play. Against Sweden in the semi-final, Hungary conceded in the first minute and then responded with 5 goals. The team did not merely reach the final, it arrived looking capable of overwhelming anyone. The final, therefore, was not a morality play between a political villain and an innocent victim. It was a football contest between the reigning champion and the tournament's highest-scoring finalist. Hungary represented a country whose own politics were authoritarian and increasingly aligned with revisionist powers, even if its team did not carry the same international symbolism as Mussolini's Italy. The wider lesson is uncomfortable. By 1938, much of European sport operated inside states moving away from democracy. The stadium did not divide the continent into simple heroes and villains. It gathered people from a complicated world and asked them to play. The final began at Colombes on June 19th. Italy scored after 6 minutes. Colombes finished a quick move and gave the champion an immediate lead. Hungary answered 2 minutes later through Titkos. For a brief moment, the final looked ready to become another uncontrolled shootout. Italy refused. In the 16th minute, Piola restored the lead. Before halftime, Colombes scored again, 3-1. Pozzo's team was not sitting deep and hoping. It was attacking Hungary's space with timing, direct running, and ruthless finishing. Meazza connected the phases, Piola occupied the center, and Colombes punished movement around him. Sarosi pulled one back in the 70th minute. At 3-2, Hungary had life. Then, with 8 minutes remaining, Piola scored his second and Italy's fourth. The final ended 4-2. Italy had defeated Norway, host France, Brazil, and Hungary. It had won every match away from home and become the first country to retain the World Cup. Pozzo became and remains the only coach to win the men's tournament twice. A famous story claims Mussolini sent the team a telegram saying, "Win or die," and that Hungarian goalkeeper Antal Szabó joked he had saved 11 lives by conceding 4. FIFA has repeated the anecdote, but the surviving documentary trail is not strong enough to treat every word as verified fact. The story captures the fear associated with fascist power. It should not be mistaken for a complete explanation of why Italy won. The evidence on the field is substantial. Italy was organized, adaptable, experienced, and clinical. Italy's second title gave the fascist regime another international success to claim. The national team had now won the World Cup in 1934, Olympic gold in 1936, and the World Cup again in 1938. The sequence allowed state media to connect football achievement with discipline, masculinity, and national strength. The players' success was real. The political use of it was real too. France 1938 also strengthened Vittorio Pozzo's place in football history. His teams were tactically flexible, psychologically resilient, and built around players who understood specific roles. He replaced much of the 1934 side without losing its identity. Meazza remained the bridge between generations, while Piola became the decisive scorer. Reducing those achievements to politics would be bad history. Removing politics from them would be equally dishonest. The tournament exposed FIFA's limitations. Its selection of another European host deepened South American resentment. Its competition was unable to respond meaningfully when Austria vanished. Its rules asked injured players to continue and exhausted teams to replay matches almost immediately. Yet the World Cup's attraction kept growing. Stars were becoming international figures. Supporters traveled. Radio and newspapers created shared memory across borders. Football was proving that it could unite attention even when the nations supplying that attention were pulling apart. There would be no World Cup in 1942. Germany and Brazil had shown interest in hosting, but FIFA never reached a final tournament before war made the question irrelevant. In September 1939, Germany invaded Poland. The conflict spread, stadiums changed purpose, players entered military service, and millions of lives were destroyed. International football did not have the power to hold the world together. Some people from the tournament would survive the war and return to football. Others would not. National borders shifted again. The Dutch East Indies moved toward independence as Indonesia. Czechoslovakia was occupied, restored, and transformed. Hungary and Italy emerged from the war politically altered. When the World Cup finally returned in Brazil in 1950, the sporting world was not resuming from a normal 4-year pause. It was rebuilding after catastrophe. The Jules Rimet Trophy reportedly spent part of the war hidden from occupying forces by Italian football official Ottorino Barassi. Like many beloved World Cup stories, the details have been polished by retelling, but the image endures because it feels true to the competition's strange fragility. A small gold object protected while the institutions and countries around it were being broken. The trophy survived. The tournament survived. Survival, however, should never be confused with innocence. France 1938 gave football unforgettable images. Leônidas moving through mud, Cuba reaching a quarterfinal, Meazza holding his nerve, Piola scoring twice in the final, and Italy becoming the first champion to defend the crown. It also gave the World Cup an empty space where Austria should have been. That empty space may be the tournament's most honest image. Football can bring strangers into the same crowd. It can make a black Brazilian star famous in Europe, give a Caribbean outsider one extraordinary week, and allow players from rival political systems to share a field. But football cannot make borders safe, stop dictators, or protect people simply because a match is beautiful. Every World Cup tells the story of its time. France 1938 told the story of excellence under pressure, institutions struggling to keep pace with politics, and joy continuing even as the horizon darkened. Italy lifted the trophy. Then the World Cup went silent for 12 years. End card. Next, Episode 4, Brazil, 1950, The Silence of the Maracanã.